Welcome to our AJAG PD Pod, the place for discussion, debate, and learning about all things accounting. Our hosts, Ivan Tabak, Jonathan Tucker, are CPAs that have been in practice for more than 3 decades. Together, they bring varying experience and viewpoints to the table, not to mention a little humor, too. Join us as we talk through current issues and hot topics, tap into expert guest insights, and enjoy the odd walk down AJAG memory lane. Before we begin today's podcast, please note, although the educational material within the podcast has been carefully prepared, none of the persons involved in the preparation of the material accepts any legal responsibility for its contents or for any consequences arising from its use. As well, the podcast material and the references contained therein may reflect laws and practices that are subject to change. Advice regarding a particular fact or situation should always be reviewed by a qualified professional. This podcast is produced and distributed by AJAG Professional Development. For more information about AJAG or any of its offerings, please visit ajag.ca.
Hi there, I'm Ivan Tabak.
And I'm Jonathan Tucker.
And today we'd like to welcome Avery Swartz to talk about the ways that AI can be used to streamline your business and get a bit of the history of it and do's and don'ts and pros and cons and whatever else she can
Some tips.
come up with. Yeah. So Avery, why don't you tell us a bit about yourself and what you do?
Sure. I think probably the easiest way to explain what I do is I'm a tech educator. And so in my work, that takes a number of different forms. I am the founder of a company called Camp Tech, and Camp Tech is a tech education company. It's been around for 12 years. So that's my small business. The whole point of Camp Tech is to run educational training sessions, mostly for small business, to learn how to apply technology in their businesses. So over the years, I've seen so many different technologies, rise and, some have fallen. For example, in the early days of Camp Tech, say in, 2014, we were teaching people how to use social media for their business. We still are teaching people how to use social media for their business, but these days we're teaching a lot about the application of AI. I've also done, I do a fair amount of speaking. I speak at conferences talking about tech and tech applications, including AI. I'm the resident tech contributor on CTV or Morning, so I regularly go on television. I also regularly go on CBC Radio to talk about technology. And right before the pandemic began, which is not something I recommend doing, my first book launched. I wrote a book about digital marketing and how small businesses can use it to grow their businesses. And the book came out 48 hours before the pandemic was declared.
Yeah.
Which at first I thought was a very, very bad timing, but it turned out to actually work quite well because businesses needed to know how to go online. Yeah. So my book became a bestseller and it did quite well and it all worked out fine. Yeah.
It was either a blessing or a curse.
Right? Yeah. Probably a bit of both.
Yeah.
Like I'm sure most people's pandemic experience.
So what's your background that got you into this field?
Oh my gosh. Okay. So if you are a person of a particular age, and I won't tell you exactly how old I am, but I will say that I'm in my mid-40s, that means that I grew up with the internet. I can clearly remember a time in my life where there was no internet. Mm-hmm. If I had said to my parents when I was a child, "Oh, Mom, Dad, when I grow up, I want to be, a web engineer," they'd be like, "Well, what? That's not a thing." So my background is very strange, in that I actually was like from a very, very, really early child, I was very fascinated with math. I really like mathematics. I like the logic of math, but I also really, really like art, and particularly performing arts. I like theater and musicals. And so, believe it or not, I went to art school. I went to drama school for university. I went to what's now called Toronto Metropolitan University, but when I was there, it was called Ryerson Polytechnic. And I went to theater school, and I went in thinking that I would be a lighting designer when I came out, because lighting design is such a beautiful mix of math and physics and art and beauty and light and design. But I came out of theater school actually finding that I really liked business. So I worked in theater. I worked in theater for about 8 years on the business side of producing theater in Toronto. And then decided that I wanted to switch things up a little bit, went back to school, learned graphic design, web design. Then I ran a web design studio, which really got me into the tech side of the internet. And then that morphed into my education company. And So, today talking about artificial intelligence, I am not a computer scientist. I am not, I'm not an AI specialist, but I'm somebody who is deeply curious about technology. I spend a lot of time reading, talking, attending conferences, listening to podcasts. And so I've really kind of done a fairly comprehensive deep dive on this subject for the last couple of years. But I approach it from a layperson's perspective. It's like, I want to learn all the technical stuff, but then I want to turn around and see, okay, where does this show up where the rubber hits the road?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that's the area that hit home with most of the people watching this, because I know for like myself, I really don't know much about it other than very general comments, and I've seen, and I know you have implemented some of the AI applications in your practice where I haven't. I really don't even know where to begin and what it could do for me.
Yeah.
So maybe we can get into some of those things, and for just any small business, what they can use AI for, how to begin, where to start, who to look to, what programs,
and what are some of the concerns also with
because there are concerns for sure. Absolutely. Yeah.
So how have you incorporated into your business, say?
Okay. So this is where we should probably be a little bit more deliberate with some vocabulary. And I don't like to use jargon because I find it's boring and it makes for more confusion than there needs to be. But when we talk about artificial intelligence, that's a massive field of computer science that has a lot of different kind of subcategories and subfields. So I think when people talk about AI kind of colloquially in society now in 2024, what they really mean is some of the more practical applications of AI, in particular, a subfield of AI called machine learning. And we could talk a little bit about exactly what that means. And then a subfield of machine learning, which is called generative AI. And we can talk a little bit about what that means. So when we talk about practical applications, such as people using ChatGPT or using the AI assistant inside, QuickBooks or something, more often than not, that is either generative AI or it's machine learning. Yeah. So how am I using it? I use it, I like to kick the tires. I like to try almost everything out there. I'll hear about a new tool. I'll sign up for it. I'll do the free trial. I'll see what it can do. More often than not, I'm grossly disappointed because there's such a hype thing going on right now with marketing. Like that, we're almost at a peak hype cycle of marketing materials. People saying, "Oh, this is the greatest. It'll do everything for you." And then when you actually go and use it, you're like, "It's not that great," or "It made mistakes," or "It lied to me." But one thing that I'm finding really interesting right now is how we're moving towards a place where even a year and a half ago, when ChatGPT first came out, you had to leave your workflow, your day-to-day workflow. So if you're regularly using Excel, you're using your accounting tools, you're using, your email program to send your emails, you would have to leave those programs and go over to an AI program. So you'd have to go over and use ChatGPT, or you'd have to go over and use an AI image generator or something. And then you'd copy and paste and maybe bring it back into the tools you were already using. Now the AI is coming to your tools that you already use. So even if you've never used ChatGPT, you might not need to, because, and I think a lot of accountants probably use Excel, the Microsoft product. Microsoft is a huge investor in OpenAI, the company that makes ChatGPT. And Microsoft has debuted Copilot, which is their AI add-on for all things Windows and all things Office. So Copilot is actually inside the newest version of Windows. It's kind of like, remember Cortana? Cortana was that thing that was inside Windows for the longest time, and it kind of wasn't very good. Cortana is out. Copilot is in. So Copilot is your new AI best friend.
Remember the paperclip?
Oh, and clipping, of course. I mean, it's all kind of like an evolution of the same thing, right? And again, it wasn't often very helpful. Yeah. It was more annoying than helpful. And that's a very fine line that a lot of these AI systems are walking. Is it annoying or is it helpful?
So yesterday I was doing a search, and And it was taking me into AI, and I didn't want it to take me into AI.
Oh,
I just wanted to do this search, and it was like, okay, so how do I stop the AI and just let me do the search?
Which program were you in that was doing that?
Oh, I was afraid you were going to ask
Was it
me.
Facebook or Instagram?
I think it was Facebook.
Yeah. Okay.
No, it was WhatsApp.
Oh, same. Okay, so same
Yeah.
thing.
What-
Different flavor of the same.
Yeah.
Meta, the
Yeah.
company, they
Yeah,
own
yeah.
Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp, and Messenger. So Meta has just debuted their generative AI tool, which
yeah.
is kind of like a ChatGPT alternative.
Yeah.
They're calling it Meta AI.
Yeah.
And how they chose to roll it out is that you access it through the search.
Yeah. But here's the thing. It says AI and then search. And it's like, but I
Really
want to search.
confusing.
Yeah.
It's really confusing.
And I wanted to search my contacts, which were in WhatsApp. And it took me out of WhatsApp into, and gave me like 6 other people with the same name. And it's like, no, I know I've got the contact in here. And so that's where at this stage, I still like to have them separate.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And there's so much here.
Yeah.
So this is an instance of the technology itself,
Yeah.
but then how humans, the company, how they choose to roll it out,
Yeah.
how they choose to tell you whether it's there or not. Or in this case with Meta, they've basically, there was technically a press release. And if you read tech news like I do, you would have seen a few of the articles.
Yeah.
But they didn't tell you it was coming. They didn't tell you what to expect. They probably haven't given you any pop-ups or nudges or information to say, here's how we suggest you use it. They just dropped it on you.
Yeah.
Like they just
And leave
deployed it.
And leave it up to you to figure out how you're going to deploy it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Why do they do that? I mean, you figure at this point they might know better
You'd hope so.
to engage their users.
Okay.
Why would such
Because I don't think
companies?
I don't think they have necessarily thought about the applications themselves. They're so insulated in their world of developing this.
Kind of like the government and the tax policies, right?
That's true.
Yeah.
Maybe they need AI.
Yeah. Well, they
Actually,
No, Jonathan, I think you're absolutely right.
digress.
You're absolutely right. There is an installation to this.
Yeah.
But also this is a company that, I mean, if we take a wide angle lens of looking at how Meta has changed, and particularly Facebook is their longest running application that has been around. Oh gosh, what is Facebook at now? Like 21 years, something like that. It's a product that has always changed and it's always evolved, and they tend to just drop a change without consulting or telling anybody it's coming. They're just like, bam, this is here, how it is.
Yeah.
But the bigger picture is that when it comes to generative AI and these generative AI applications like ChatGPT, Copilot from Microsoft, Google has one called Google Gemini, Meta AI, and then a whole bunch of other smaller players out there. We're in an AI arms race.
Yeah.
And there is no clear winner yet. ChatGPT had first mover advantage, but
So that's revelatory in and of itself. It isn't just ChatGPT. There's these other platforms, which I just discovered last week. Somebody said, well, have you tried this? And it's like, well, I didn't know. Right? So we're all just at different stages learning about this, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So to like, in a really roundabout way to come back to your question, Ivan, of how am I, like where is AI showing up in my small business? It is showing up in some probably unusual ways because I am an early adopter. I do choose to go out and play with tools, but I'm noticing more often than not, even if I didn't go out to seek it, it's showing up in my day-to-day workflow. Because Gemini is Google's AI product. It's starting to show up inside the Google workspace. Copilot is Microsoft's AI tool. And for people that have, trying to think, I think now they just call it Microsoft 365. They used to call it Office 365, Microsoft 365 for business. It was very confusing, but I think now all that has gone away and now it's just Microsoft 365. So depending on which subscription you have, you can add on Copilot to your subscription. Yeah. And I've done so to my subscription. I paid, it wasn't cheap. I think it was like $400 a year to add it on, but I wanted to play with it. And now there's a Copilot button inside Excel, inside Word, inside PowerPoint. And so I don't even have to leave those tools. I can just start using generative AI inside the tools I'm already using.
Okay, so give me an example of how you would use that button. You're building a spreadsheet of some financial analysis, or whatever. You're listing out your sales, your expenses, or whatever it might be.
Mm.
What do you need AI for?
Analysis.
What could you use it for? And how do you type in a question?
Yeah.
Are there that?
Yeah. You type in a question, you query it. It's called prompting.
Okay.
You're prompting the generative AI model to start doing a task. So now I'm gonna go way up high and back down into the weeds and almost right back again. So in using AI, you need to understand a little bit about what it is and how it works. So I mentioned that these are generative AI systems. Generative AI, how it works or what it is, it's right there in the title, generative. It generates or creates something new. And it creates something new that is similar to the data it was trained on. Okay, so generative AI is a machine learning system. Machine learning is trained on a whole bunch of input data. So input data means that whoever programmed the thing in the beginning, they had to give it kind of a knowledge base or a database. And so in the case of, if we're going to use a generative image maker, it was trained on images. It was trained on photographs, on paintings, illustrations, etc. In the case of ChatGPT, which is a writing, well, actually, ChatGPT can do a bunch of different modes, but if we're using it to write, then it was trained on a bunch of literal language, like books and web pages. The generative AI that's inside Excel was trained on a bunch of numbers and a bunch of sheets and looking at calculations. So when you are asking the machine to create something new for you, you're asking it to tap into its knowledge base of what it knows. What that knowledge base is really, really good at identifying patterns, both patterns in its source material, patterns in what it learned, and patterns in what you're giving it. So that's why it's really, really good at analyzing, because if you give it a spreadsheet and you say, find all instances of blah, 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 or do an analysis for me and pull out the key themes or whatever it might be. It's really good at detecting patterns in data sets. And then it learns as it goes. This is the important part of machine learning. So when machine learning systems, when you first engage with them, they're often not great. Like they need to learn a little bit from you. They need more context often. They might need an example to show them exactly what you want them to make. But as you keep conversing and interacting with the system, it gets better. And it gets better through trial and error, through feedback, and through lots of practice. So knowing that means that you can start to think about what the machine might need from me in order to get the output that I want from it, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting because, you run a training company. I run a training company. We know a lot about how people learn. People tend to learn through trial and error, feedback, and lots of practice. So do these machines. So treat it like an intern. Treat it like somebody that just started at your company that knows a lot because they're smart. They went to college. They graduated. They know a heck of a lot about a lot of things, but they don't know anything about you. They don't know how you write. They don't know how you present information. They don't know the culture. They don't know that maybe you use emojis in all of your communication.
Or you start your emails with the same.
Exactly.
Every email I use AI on now, you wouldn't be able to tell the difference between an email I wrote versus an email that AI generates.
Probably because you've spent a lot of time training it. It's starting to learn.
Unwittingly, yeah.
So
it does get better.
Let me ask you. So you're saying we have to help train it?
Yes.
So you ask it, analyze this chart of information for whatever data set you want to extract.
Yeah.
And it doesn't give you exactly what you want.
Yeah.
So then what's the next step? Do you just go in, fill in what you need, or redo formulas? How do you get your feedback back into the system for it to realize it's coming from you as a result of its previous attempt to give you what you want? Like, what's the back and forth like? How does it...
Think of it as a conversation.
Exactly.
Sorry, you missed this detail.
Yep.
You literally...
you
say,
type
it. Sorry,
really?
no, you missed this detail.
Yeah.
I want this emphasized. Sometimes I will cut a paragraph because it's taken a whole list of information and it hasn't ranked certain details I want it to rank in order. So I'll go back and amend the instruction, or if it's generated, I'll say, no, give me another version of this. so that I can then make sure it's emphasized this point or that point. So it is like having a conversation, and you are interacting with this thing back and forth all the time. That's the fascinating thing about it is that for me, I can't begin to think of all the applications I can use. That's where I have to stop.
Yeah, it's pretty bonkers.
And say to myself, hold on, is this something do I need somebody to do this? Or can this thing do this for me? It's crazy.
It really helps to think of it like an intern, like a very, very, very smart intern that just doesn't necessarily know the particulars of your organization and how you like to work. But Jonathan's absolutely right. It's a conversation. And the machine is not only trained on all that input data so that it has that knowledge, it's also trained on something called NLP, or natural language processing. It knows how humans talk and how we interact. So you can interact with it in a very conversational way. How I interact with my generative AI, and I tend to use, I use ChatGPT for kind of general writing. I use Copilot a bit inside Excel. I use it more inside PowerPoint these days when I'm building a PowerPoint presentation. I use generative AI a lot inside a tool called Canva, which is a graphic design tool. And then I use I've been starting to experiment with using it inside meetings. Like if I'm having a virtual meeting with somebody, a video call, using it to take notes and summarize, which I think we're going to talk about because I think you maybe do that too a bit, Jonathan. But in all of these situations, I can literally interact with it the way that I would with a human. I can say, "Now you got that wrong."
You can get angry at it.
Yeah.
You can swear at it.
You can.
You'll do what?
I'm gonna love it.
How does it react?
It's so very muted.
If it gives you, an answer, and this is very common, it'll give you an answer that's kind of half right.
Yeah.
Then you just say, "Hey, the first part is right, and this is what I like about it, and this is where you're correct. The second part is wrong, and this is where you're incorrect. Try again," and it will just go back and it'll try again. So when I look back through my conversation histories with generative AI tools, they're often quite long.
Yeah.
And
you can keep those.
It, yeah.
Like I will start the day with a query, and I'll just keep going back to that throughout the day, or I'll have another query. And as long as I can remember, I usually theme my entries. So if it's about, I don't know, capital gains or something or other, then I can just go back to that and I can keep adding to it as I go. Like it's not restricted. But that's how I've started to chronicle these entries, because there is so much information. And I use it mostly on my phone, but it's like, where was that? So there's search capabilities now to find that type of thing. And I'm noticing that's even becoming enhanced now. The search capabilities are improving.
Yeah.
So, but back to your analogy or your illustration, which is, so how do I use it in a spreadsheet, right? The thing I worry about, Avery, is I worry about security. I'm working on a client spreadsheet. It's got their name, it's got their numbers, and now AI is looking over my shoulder. How do I know where that information's going?
Yeah.
That I'm worried about.
I'm worried about it too.
Yeah. Or if so there's all of those things. So I'm to the point where I'm using it. I will not have names or references to things in there because I just don't know. I won't.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, I mean, you take it a step beyond that. I mean, you're letting this thing come into your computer system. So forget about what's on the spreadsheet.
What else is it?
Can it access anything else on your in your computer? Any other file?
Yeah. That's what I'm worried about.
Yeah.
One of the applications I'll use is I'll get an email from a client, and maybe it's going to be a long email. They've set out several questions. I'll cut and paste that into, I use ChatGPT for this.
Yeah.
And then I'll just say, I need a response to this, including the following points. But I'll make sure there's no email addresses.
Yeah.
There's no names. Just give me a generic response so I can then cut and paste it back into my email.
Yeah, I'm doing the same.
Yeah.
Where I'll take kind of point form, like I'll say, this is what I want it to include.
Yeah.
Can you just build the rest of the email out for me? The like, hi, how are you? Hope you had a nice weekend. Like all that stuff. Where I'm like, just take care of that part, please.
And the other thing, sometimes I'll say, I do not need you to go beyond this information. Don't go out and search the web. Don't go anywhere else. I just need you to focus on this. So no additional search required. So I'm that specific in terms of saying, no, just stick to this information. Just give me something from that.
Yeah. Yeah. And on the issue of security, I will say this. right now, with all the generative AI tools that I use, this is the first time in many, many years that I actually read the terms of service for most of the products. And I got an email, I don't know, it was a week or two ago from Google, because I use Google to power some of my business stuff. It powers my email, and I use some like Google Workspace and Google Drive. So I got an email from Google, and it said, we've updated our terms of service for people on Google Workspace. And I was like, I cannot tell you the last time I ever actually read the terms of service. Yeah. But I quickly did a scan, and I was like, is there anything in here that says AI, the use of AI, or the use of a large language model? That's the name of often the database.
I'm curious, Avery, why did you read it? Why didn't you just highlight the terms of reference, because they go on for pages, and just say, summarize this for me?
Well, I could have.
I'm just saying, isn't it amazing how when you're thinking, like, that's going to take me 45 minutes if I don't fall asleep reading it, right? Just summarize the points for me.
Yeah.
Right. It's crazy.
I totally could have.
Yeah. That's what I mean. We can't even begin to conceive how we could use this.
Yeah. And a lot of people that are really, bullish on AI tools, especially generative AI tools, they're trying to embrace what they call an AI first mindset of in that situation of, any task, just thinking to yourself, how could I use AI here? How could I use AI here? How could I use AI here? And knowing that in some instances, it not only might, but it probably will fail miserably.
Yeah.
But there is an exponential growth curve when it comes to generative AI. And this is the thing that I think, I don't know, we're going to see. I don't have a crystal ball. I can only, predict a little bit of what I think might happen. But there were all of these studies done on how fast a computer system like ChatGPT could improve. And there's a direct relationship between how big that data set is, how much information it has to pull on, and how the model itself can improve and get better. And what I mean by get better is it can give more accurate responses. It needs less prompting and coaching. It needs less like, hey, you got that wrong. Can you please redo it? Like it's better just right out of the gate. So, right now, if you use ChatGPT, if you pay for it, you have access to something called ChatGPT 4. Yeah. Before that was 3.5, then 3, then 2 as we're going back. OpenAI says ChatGPT 5 is coming this summer. So we'll see. But the ability of the model to improve is directly related to the size of the language model and how much information is in there and how much it can process computationally. And it has, at least to date, been shown to not be a linear growth curve. It's been shown to be an exponential growth curve.
Yeah, that's just...
And, the thing about linear versus exponential growth is that when you're at the beginning, you can't tell. Yeah. They look like they're about the same. It's only in hindsight where you can be like, oh my gosh, this was hockey stick growth. So I think it's, I was chatting with a friend recently and remembering what it was like in the early days of the internet. I clearly remember 1995 and, using dial-up to then maybe write an email. Yeah. And at first we used the internet to just replicate and replace things that we were already doing in the manual world. Yeah. We would use it to send emails, but we didn't really imagine social media or online shopping or the integration of social media and online shopping, being able to watch a TV show online and then literally click in the moment from the palm of our hand and buy the t-shirt that the person's wearing on the TV show. Like in 1995, that would have been sci-fi.
Mind-blowing.
And now I can do that right now if I wanted to. So I feel it's the same way with the adoption of machine learning and generative AI tools. They're not just for computer scientists. Yeah. They're not just for, data analysts. They're for everyone to use the way that the internet is for everyone to use. So
we're all participating in this.
Yeah. So right now we're using it to kind of assist with the stuff we're already doing. But I think there will be all of these applications that it's really hard to think, what are we even going to use it for?
Can I bring it back to Ivan's question again? Because as we're thinking through how we would use this in our practice, because that's who's watching this for the most part, which is, one of the other things is, how do we tell clients we're doing this?
Yeah.
What do we need to be thinking about? Do we?
well, that's it. Do we? If it's just a tool,
Yeah.
for us to generate the work product that we would otherwise generate the old-fashioned way, if you call it that, right? Then what do you need to tell clients anything about?
Well, it could be a matter of
Or
if you're using their data in terms of incorporating these searches, there could be issues there. So one of the things I ran into was we use the same IT person, and so I said to Fred, I need you to go and do what you did manually and tell me, like, is there any security issues I've got to worry about here? And so I would say to people that are playing with it in our audience that are watching, just think about those issues, right? And who's your IT person? Right. Run that by them, because what I've ended up doing is using several platforms to get to an end result, which includes ChatGPT, but each of those have user agreements. Each of those have different security levels. And so before you start putting information that could have client information in it, think about what if ChatGPT gets hacked, or if any of those platforms get hacked, like what are their security provisions in place? We got to start thinking about all of those things. It's not just your data or my data sitting somewhere. It's now going beyond that.
Yeah. So I that leads to, we have to start updating our engagement letters. Do you have anything in your engagement letter?
I haven't. What I have done though, is actually documented the research that we did in terms of, okay, this platform so we actually, if somebody comes and says, well, my information is now out on the internet, at least I can say, listen, before we started using that, these are the steps we went to make sure that it was okay. But what if it changes? Like how frequently do you have to keep going back and saying, okay, ChatGPT, is your security just as good, or right?
Yeah.
Well, we're going to be having additional sessions with our cybersecurity people. With Armor Cyber.
Yeah.
So
these are the type of questions
we can talk to them about.
But to get back to your question about disclosure and whether or not you need to tell people you're using AI tools, this gets into some regulatory stuff, which of course, all of this, and documentation is a key part of that.
Yeah.
So in Canada right now, we don't have anything. Our Copyright Act doesn't recognize artificial intelligence and stuff created by artificial intelligence and stuff that was made and put into artificial intelligence, although it's in the works. We also have an AI and Data Act that's in the works. But right now, there's nothing that says, from a regulation standpoint.
Chasing this all the time.
They are. And it's because, interestingly enough, the region of the world that's really been leading the charge in the last decade, at least, in regulation of all things internet and data and security and privacy, is the EU.
I was going to say.
Yeah. And so there is an AI Data Act in the EU that has passed, and it says you must disclose the use of artificial intelligence. So it's like, okay, but then how are people actually doing that? Are they putting it in their engagement letters? Are they putting it, in little small print disclaimer down at the bottom of the website?
Yeah.
How, and this is
in your email footer or wherever you're
Exactly. And saying, we are using it. These are the tools we're using. This is how we're using it. This is the data that we're using.
Yeah.
And then, as you said, there's what you're doing internally. But then there's what happens up the food chain.
Yeah.
There's what's OpenAI doing, what's Microsoft doing, and this is very similar to a previous piece of legislation called the GDPR, which talked about general data protection, which is like you have an obligation in your firm, but also those companies that you engage with that they help process all of that data.
Yeah.
They have an obligation as well.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of like the left hand needs to know what the right hand is doing.
Yeah.
Because data breaches, I'm not sure if you, maybe your cybersecurity expert would probably agree. I don't think of data breaches as an if. I think of them as a when.
Yeah, right.
Sort of scenario.
Yeah.
But what's interesting about the way that generative AI works is, let's say that you do potentially have some customer information, some proprietary firm data, et cetera, that ends up going into the AI system. It doesn't just sit in a database the way that they're like the language models aren't databases in the traditional sense. It's not like an index. It's more like a giant mishmash pool. And this is where things actually get really interesting because, and this is how like cutting edge this all is, no one on the planet knows how these systems work.
Yeah.
I'm not kidding.
Yeah.
No one.
Yeah.
Even the scientists that make them have no idea how they work. Well, okay, maybe they have some idea.
Yeah.
They have an idea of how they're programmed, and they know that the generative AI systems pull from this pile.
Mm.
They know that they look for patterns, and that when they create something new, they're using basically like prediction modeling to create something that is similar to what they were trained on.
Mm.
So they know that there's patterns in language. They know that there's patterns in art. There's patterns in math. There's patterns in accounting. There's patterns in tax law. And so they know that it can go in and kind of pull all of that and then try and predict what you want it to make, but they don't know exactly how it comes to the answers that it does. I have a friend who's literally a computer scientist at one of Canada's large machine learning institutes who refers to it as a mechanical parrot. He says that it's sophisticated enough that it can, do a lot of very fast analysis, but it's not thinking. It's predicting. It's going and getting information from what it knows and it's parroting it back to you.
Right. And that's why I think it's at the point where you can never simply generate something and say it's good to go.
No.
Right? You're just going to take it and say, okay, well, that's a start. Now I'm going to edit it. Right? And
Yeah.
Now, so again, I'm thinking back. You're a collector. Think about how AI could be used, or ChatGPT, in your collection. What information would you like to know that would take you hours to get at? Right, that would be another example. But in the accounting practice world, a couple of areas that I think would be useful for firms where they have staff. I have a conversation with a client. How do I convey that information to my staff so they're aware of what's... So we, until this came along, we would transcribe. It's in my engagement letter. It's in the footer of my email. It's on my voicemail message that all calls and meetings are recorded. We would transcribe that. Literally, somebody would sit and listen and create a summary of it.
Yeah.
Now, we use ChatGPT for that, along with other documents, and we'll have that transcribed within 2 to 3 minutes.
Sure.
There's the call. So now that gets put in the file, and a staff person can look at it, and we can see the original transcription. The transcription quality is amazing now, I'm finding, versus what it used to be a couple of years ago. So that's, again, a very practical way of facilitating and also covering yourself if there's ever a question of, was this ever discussed?
Right.
Now you've got it sitting in a file.
Yeah.
That can also be a liability as well, by the way. So you have to be careful of that. Another area, and you mentioned about the Income Tax Act. Something new comes out and it's long, it's difficult. Why not just put it into ChatGPT and say, can you summarize that for me? Or this section of the act, I don't understand. What are they getting at? Summarize that for me.
Yep.
So those types of things are really practical and helpful.
Yep.
But that's also scary because you're also asking it to interpret technical language with maybe references to other sections that aren't spelled out right there.
So in that
turn have to be interpreted.
And in that instance, it will tell you, I can't access that section. So you've got to be thinking, all right, what sections are referenced here, put it in so that it can include that in its assessment. But I'm not relying on it entirely. I'm saying, can you give me the essence of what this is getting at? So it will at least give me big picture, but I'm not gonna take it further than that at this stage until I can improve my own abilities with this, right? But those are just some of the practical things that you can use this. Even photographs, like I'm thinking of somebody going on an inventory account, take a picture of it and then say, summarize this for me, and it'll list. I mean, I've done that. I'm learning another language, so I'll take a picture and say, okay, summarize all the items in there and give it to me in this language.
Yeah.
So we could still use the same type of application in our work.
Yeah. Well, your English is pretty good, as
Well,
I don't know how much more you have to.
Well, it is my second language, though. So those are some of the Those are some of the ways that I think people could immediately access this.
Yeah. I mean, you have to remember that ChatGPT is a generalist and it has a really broad general knowledge. So you have to be a little bit careful about asking it vague questions because it's a bit unsure about which part of its knowledge it should tap into. And its knowledge comes from the dominant parts of society. So if you ask it things like for example, I was asking it recently about lots of ideas for a family vacation, and it kept really pushing me towards like American ideas. And I was like, oh, right, because, in North America, that tends to be the dominant, like there's more magazine articles about American destinations. There's more newspaper articles about it.
So that's informing.
So then the majority of the response is coming from the majority of its knowledge. So you have to be aware of that and counteract it and say, no, only give me Canadian answers. Right. And maybe 8 times out of 10, it'll get it right. So something like tax law, you would have to be very, very careful to make sure you keep reiterating Canadian tax law. You might even have to, and I'm sure somebody has built this already, you can build custom GPTs inside ChatGPT. So it's the ability of augmenting its knowledge by adding in more knowledge that it can potentially access.
What are those called? I'm trying to think now because there's a drop down and I can select from these different ones.
They're called custom GPTs, but I think it just says GPTs, and then you can go and search and look for them.
But they have different purposes for them.
And people can just make them. So I'm sure someone has probably taken Canadian tax law because it's a publicly available document and fed it into ChatGPT, and then you can ask questions about the document. But to Ivan's point, it will sometimes try and go outside of its knowledge. And so if something seems a bit odd, you'd be like, I don't know. Like, you need to verify anything that it states as a fact because it sometimes will try and default to its general knowledge, or it will go outside of its specific, more niche knowledge if it doesn't know the answer. And that's where it can get confused. It's not lying because it's trying to kill you or it's coming for you or any of those like nefarious purposes. It's lying because it's a prediction machine. It's trying to predict what it thinks you want based on what it knows.
And that's why when I'm doing a search on it, I'm trying to restrict its search. I'm trying to say, I want you just to focus on this, because I found when I make it too general, it gives me wrong information.
Absolutely.
And so that's why I say, I want you to just look at this CRA guide. Tell me now where I'm going to find this, or tell me about all the points that deal with this issue as an example, right? So I'm saying don't go any further. Just confine your search, your generation to this.
Absolutely. And you can be that specific. I'm a big fan of, this is very strange. I'll say this right up front. This is very strange, but it tends to work. To give you're just going to laugh at this, okay? You can get better, more accurate results from a generative AI system if you engage in role play. So
dress up.
Right?
Before you ask.
It's like, big like little mustache. What I mean by that is, if you give it a role to play, you literally say, act as if you are a master accountant. Act as if you are a bookkeeper. Act as if you are a Canadian accountant with an encyclopedic knowledge of the latest tax law or whatever. And then you say, I am, and then you play the role that you're going to play. I am researching the latest changes for one of my clients in my firm. Right. And then you be very specific. You say, I want you to search the document and find for me where, the new trust law is defined. And then summarize the results for me and give me the results so that they would be understandable by someone with a grade 8 knowledge level, and make sure it's no longer than 300 words or whatever. And when you add those very specific instructions, you're asking it to tap into that more specialized knowledge, and you're giving the context of the situation, and you're giving it very clear parameters. That is a much better prompt than just saying, tell me what's new.
What really annoys me about using ChatGPT, and we should talk about the other platforms because we keep talking about ChatGPT as though that's the only one. But if I'm looking to give a response to a client on something, give me the 3 practical points. The last point it will tell me is, and you should check with a qualified tax professional.
Right.
Well, that's me.
Yeah.
And it's missed the whole point. And now, yeah. Delete that.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. But, even when you talk about other generative AI systems that are not ChatGPT, they all behave the same way. So that
But does some focus on different facets? Should we be thinking about using that one for this and this one for that?
So there are the ones that are just known as kind of like they're the broad generalists.
Yeah.
And because they're the language model that they're tapping into, which is that knowledge base, that database, has a very broad, deep, but broad knowledge. So that is ChatGPT. That is Google Gemini, Meta AI. There's one called Claude, which I love, but you can't access it in Canada.
Really?
You have to use a VPN.
Okay. Wow.
Coming from America. There is, what else did I forget? Copilot. But Microsoft is now building their own. Like the current iteration of Copilot is based off a boilerplate from OpenAI, but Microsoft, well, maybe like 3 weeks ago or so, 4 weeks ago, they acquired another big AI company basically to bring them in-house and build their own AI team. So now they're going to build a competitor. So when you're using any of these kind of big, they're called frontier models. They're foundational models, and then they have frontier applications. The foundational models are generalists, but there are industry-specific tools that have a very deep knowledge. I'm not an accountant, so I can't tell you which ones are in the accounting industry.
Right.
But I'm a marketer, and I can tell you that in the marketing industry, there are a few that go really, really deep on, for example, search engine optimization is a marketing tactic to try and get your website to rank higher in Google search. Yeah. So there are a few generative AI tools that have the general knowledge of ChatGPT and the deep knowledge of a search engine optimization specialist. And then you can go and just use that one tool to work on your SEO. But again, I think all this stuff is going to come to the tools that you already have.
Yeah.
So your general tools, your Microsoft Excel, your Microsoft Outlook, your social media platforms, those will get the general knowledge. And then any of your very industry-specific tools, or if they don't already, very soon they will have generative AI added into them.
The other thing I found, Avery, is, on the tax applications that I'm talking about, our tax research database, now having used ChatGPT, the search capabilities within these databases is so limited.
Yes.
Because I have to be thinking in terms of, all right, which are the search terms I need to, whereas with ChatGPT, I can just let my imagination run wild and focus in on things. Yeah. So I can imagine our tools are going to change drastically very quickly because they'll have to.
And that comes down to the fundamental understanding that generative AI is not search. It's not the same thing. Search is and Google search or searching, an index. It's the digital equivalent of now we're going to get really antiquated. Remember when we used to have encyclopedia sets? I'm old enough to remember getting the Encyclopedia Britannica, and you would literally go to the index, and the index you'd and you'd be like, okay, where does it mention, icebergs or whatever, and then you'd go and find the page and
find the book. Right.
So that is what's happening with Google search and with other search. You're literally searching an index. Generative AI is not searching an index. Generative AI is searching its original database and looking for patterns, and then it's going to try and make something new by predicting what could come next, like the next sentence in a word, the next word in a sentence. That's what I meant to say. The next word in a sentence, the next sentence in a paragraph, etc. It's predicting what should come next, and that's why sometimes it makes mistakes, because sometimes it just makes mistakes. Everybody makes mistakes when you predict, but it's not the same thing as searching. We're searching. This is really complicated, but in an ideal world, when you search for things, there's one true answer. But when you're generating, there's not one true answer. There could be we could all enter the exact same thing into ChatGPT, and it would give us 3 different answers. It's it's prediction modeling. It's a mechanical parrot. It's trying to predict what you want it to make.
I'd encourage you and those that are just try it.
Yeah, have fun with it. Yeah. Play with it.
One of the things that I'll do is I'll say, we've written little templates now within this to say, okay, out of this conversation, please give me a summary please give me action items and also questions that I should have asked.
Yeah.
Right? Is there anything I missed here? And so it'll just keep doing that same repetitive function over and over again with each conversation. Right? So it's very powerful. What that only came out of me saying, so what do I want this thing to do?
Yeah.
What would be useful here?
Yeah.
So,
and we think so often of using it to generate stuff, like to write emails for us, to write briefs, to, in the marketing world, there's all kinds of content creation. But one thing that I think maybe some of your firm and other firms can use as well is simulations and modeling scenarios. It's quite good at it. It'll almost annoy you at how good it is of saying, and again, strip out any personal information, strip out any identifiable information, but give it the basic scenario of what's going on inside someone's business and say, this is what they're struggling with. This is their business model. This is da-da-da-da-da. I want to be able to, I want to interact with you, ChatGPT. I'm going to say, I want to interact with you as if you're their CFO and I'm the consulting accountant on this program. Please act as the CEO and we're going to have a conversation going back and forth about different potential avenues for their business model. And then you just in this conversation and it's simulating what it might be like to talk to the CFO in that situation. Yeah. So those sorts of things are really cool because it'll help you to maybe think about something and see things that you didn't see yourself.
And the beauty of this is that it doesn't work 9 to 5.
Right. It doesn't need to sleep
all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing. So fascinating topic.
I mean, you can, I guess, see, for example, if you take your database of your personal tax clients within the tax software files.
Yeah.
But if you want to go through and say, go through and give me a list of the top 20 clients who had rental income and had a income or loss. I mean, I don't know if it's at this point because they would have to access the specific software and get into that type of file, but
it could certainly do
probably coming. Right. I said extract it and list it out, but that would be within the tax software.
I think what you'd have to do in a case like that is you'd have to extract it from the tax software and get it into something that can access.
Right.
Because when you think
to do it myself.
Yeah. In some sense.
Right. And this is where...
Yeah, you've got to decide what makes...
But I guess, I don't know. I mean, can it get into, if you tell it, access this software, go into tax prep and pick out every client that had this type of income and create a chart with the top, whatever. And is it able?
I haven't seen that.
No. So ChatGPT, if you pay for the subscription model, not the free version, but the version that cost me $20 a month, you can add files to any prompts and interactions with that model. So your files, you can add PDFs, you can add Excel sheets, and you can add CSV files, and text files, and code files, and images, and audio files, stuff like that. Video files as well, I think. But in the case of the line of work that you're in, you're probably looking at an Excel sheet or a CSV. Or the company that makes your tax software will eventually take something like ChatGPT and bake it right in. So you don't even have to leave the tool to do so.
To do what I'm just describing.
Yeah.
It's really function of that software itself.
It's really enhancing what's there already to a certain, but it's pretty limited, right?
Yeah.
So, but that will come.
Yeah. But what I love about this is that when you think about a traditional kind of a search or a retrieval system, like go and get me the top 20, or not top, but you know what I mean? Go and get me 20 examples of my clients that are, their real estate may have been changed based on updates to tax law. But not only should you go get it, then I want to ask you a bunch of questions about it. And I want to run some simulations on it. And I want to, potentially say, I'm imagining you could use it even in your own business planning as a firm. If you're looking at your clientele and you're thinking like, okay, well, there was a big change to tax law, which means that, we should probably start to move more towards this type of client, less of this type of client. Ask it to analyze your clientele. What's the percentage? Like, do you have a whale that if you lose that whale, you're in trouble and you need to go whale hunting? You're looking at it and you're like, oh my gosh, we have a lot of people that, we're only charging them around this amount of money, but we'd like to move towards more of a clientele that would charge this amount of money. Then you can ask it to analyze this bonkers. You could say, okay, so we've got a list of, first of all, pull out what we would, based on these criteria, either billable hours or whatever criteria you want. Tell me the bottom 10 and the top 10 of my clients. And then go and tell me what are demographic or behavioral similarities amongst them. And then it might say like, okay, well, as you define your top 10 best clients, they are people that are of these demographics. They live in this area. They, behave in this certain way. And then you could say, make me a sales and marketing plan for how I'm going to go out in the next 6 months and get 5 more clients just like that.
Another way
like that's like it's not just pulling the data; it's then being able to interact with the data and analyze it.
Or you could give it an instruction and just say, "I'm not going to try to direct you in this. Tell me what you see."
Mm-hmm.
Right? What are the observations from this information?
Yeah,
because that's what you do with a consultant, and that's where we get back to the idea of having an AI approach. Now, always, right?
Yeah.
Think, how could I use this?
Yeah.
Instead of using a person or a service, can I do it here myself?
Yeah. Yeah, just learning, because again, it's really good at identifying patterns.
Yeah.
So say, what patterns are you seeing in this data? And sometimes I have asked that, like full stop, and it'll come up, it'll be like, what do you mean? Like I need a little bit more to get started. But sometimes it needs just a little bit to start going, and they're like, oh, no, that's not what I meant. Yeah. And you're like, stop doing that. Now we're going to go over here instead. But I'm a big fan of asking any generative AI system, whether you're inside ChatGPT, whether you're using Copilot inside Microsoft, whatever it might be. One of my favorite things to put in one of the prompts is I'll say, what do you need from me to do this task? Same way that I would ask that of an intern. Like, have I been clear? Do you understand what I'm asking you to do? And if not, ask me questions so that you can do the job better. It really is that like kind of very natural human style conversation.
So I'm listening to all this. You're involved in it. You understand it. And I'm clueless, right? So I know that you can call up ChatGPT, right? And you can start typing. But, if we go right down to the bare basics, if I have an Excel spreadsheet with whatever is on it, right? And I want something analyzed on it. You're saying now there's a button in Excel where I would click and I could talk about, and I could query something and it would know that it's this spreadsheet that I'm asking about. If I have another Excel spreadsheet in my database, can I then say within Excel, go to file, name, and do the same analysis? Can it do that? Or
no,
do I have
just yet?
Okay.
Soon. Very, very soon.
Okay. So then if I wanted that to happen, I'm working on this spreadsheet A, but I want to bring in spreadsheet B. I'm not, so I don't, there's like a million questions I could be asking. So all that to say, I'm sure there's a lot of people that are in the same position as me. They are interested. They want to maybe try it, but they haven't the first idea about just the practical, where do you click? Where do you go? What has to be opened? Are there courses like that, like bare bones basic things that you could recommend? Is it something that you offer through your camp, etc.? Like,
I'm dying to jump in here because you know what I'd say? I would put in, just as an example, put in a trial balance, because I know there's a lot of people that will still be, building their financial statement templates, and put in your trial balance, and then the instruction is now create a balance sheet for me.
Okay.
Create an income statement for me.
Right.
It's now going to take that and it's going to put it in, and it's going to say to you, it's going to offer it up to you and say, what do you think? And now you're going to say, you didn't group prepaids where I want it. I want you to bold all headings. It's all the, think of all
I
the
would much rather it say, take this trial balance, put it into caseware that I already have, and then run
It's
it.
coming.
Yeah.
That's coming.
Yeah.
For sure.
But
Yeah.
what I mean is, instead of looking for somebody to offer you a course, and I'm not trying to diminish your services, but try it yourself, because then let your imagination run with it. Because honestly, Ivan, you think I know a lot about this? I'm maybe 6 months ahead of you on this. That's how little time I've got invested in this. And honestly, I would say to anyone, find a young person. I'm aging myself here, but find a young person who's all over this stuff and just say, teach me about this, or I wanted to do this. What would you say? And that's what I did. I had a co-op student who was all over this. And I said, okay, could you make it do this? And pretty soon, I'm finding I'm just learning from that as I'm watching them. So I wouldn't feel too restricted that I got to find a course. I'm not, as I say, play with it first, and then come up with your questions. Okay, I can't get it to do this, or is there a way to get it to do that? That's been my experience with this. And the problem is there really isn't a lot of instruction out there, right? There isn't a lot of courses.
Yeah, because it changes so fast.
Yeah.
So, I mean, people learn in lots of different ways, and you can layer different models and modes of learning on top of each other. And there's absolutely a lot to be said for the, like, just mess with it model of learning. And I'm a big fan of, like, experimentation, learning, just like how the machines themselves learn. They learn through trial and error, through feedback and lots of practice. But yes, I mean, there are some courses. My company runs some courses. There's a whole bunch of free ones out there now. Like Microsoft literally just dropped AI Essentials last week. Strangely enough, there's a really, really good one from the University of Helsinki, and you can do it online for free.
There's another suggestion too, which people might be interested in. Governments are trying to encourage people to embrace this. There's funding for this.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
So take a look around for funding that might be available for firms to embrace this.
Yes, absolutely.
Because governments are trying to encourage this. So that's another place to look. Yeah. I sent an email this week to a grant writing or a grant organization saying, is there anything out there that I should be aware of that I could qualify for? Right. So
I mean,
funding opportunities.
I think you can kind of hit it on all those points, and you can almost hit it simultaneously. I think it is really important. Also, in most cases, a lot of people do like to talk to other people to compare notes. I'm going to disagree a little bit with you, Jonathan, that it doesn't necessarily have to be a young person. I know some really savvy older people that are learning this quite well.
Yeah.
But the idea of comparing notes, of saying, what are you using it for? What are you using it for? That is so essential. And you're not, the biggest thing I want to say to anyone is you're not behind. You're not late.
No.
Like, we are really, really, really at the beginning days of this, but I don't think it's going away. It might stall a little bit. It might not continue on the exponential growth curve. It might slow down because of things like regulation, because of adoption, because I firmly believe there's a quote that, this is taking it outside of context, but there's a quote from the Seven Habits of Highly Effective People, where Stephen Covey says that change moves at the speed of trust. And I think that applies with technology adoption as well. Like, right now, Ivan, you don't trust it. I don't trust it either. I think I trust it maybe a little bit more than you do. And maybe Jonathan is probably about the same level of me, of like, we trust it enough to mess around with it, but we don't trust it enough to just like, we're not going to toss it the keys and let it like take the Lamborghini out for the weekend, or excuse me, the Batmobile. So,
Found me out.
Right? I know you're into Batman. But just the only way you can move towards trust is through experimentation.
Yeah.
So you have to just kind of play with it a little bit.
It hasn't.
I don't think it's as much not trusting it. For me, it's just not knowing where to start.
Okay.
And I'm not someone who has the patience to sit and play.
Right.
And learn. I want somebody to just tell me what to do.
Okay.
And that'll get me started. And once I've started, then I'm more comfortable.
And it will tell you what to do.
Doing it.
That's the interesting thing, is it's human enough. It's going to tell you what to do. And that's how that's been my experience. And I do not trust it to be a consultant. I won't rely on it, but I will say, here's what I want you to work with. And so now you're the intern. This is what I need from you. And then I'll look at what it outputs, and it's like, no, that's not. But, one of the handy things, just humorously, sometimes you get those annoying emails from clients and you just really want to let them have it. And sometimes my response to ChatGPT is, once I cut and paste that in, please remove all emotion from my response. Because it's like, no, I would really love to let you know what I'm thinking, but it will give me, so it's my intern, but it's not my consultant.
Maybe I should start editing out some of that.
Or adding it back. But I
problem.
For first use, don't apply it in spreadsheets. Sign up for a ChatGPT account.
Right.
You can get a free account, so you can do that right away. chat.openai.com. Then use it for communication first. Start with text-based communication, because that's the more powerful model, is based on language. And if you, ironically, inside ChatGPT, if you try and ask it a math question, and we're talking very simple math questions, it will get it wrong. It's hilarious. It doesn't know simple sums and simple arithmetic, because it wasn't, the base model of ChatGPT wasn't trained to do math. It was trained to speak human language. So leave the spreadsheets aside at first. Just play with ChatGPT at first in a transactional, conversational kind of way to try and improve your email communication or to summarize a document for you. Play with it in that way. Get used to the going back and forth, giving it feedback, seeing what it can do. And then once you start to get a sense of how generative AI works, then you start to apply it towards analyzing a document.
So with you training it, in your to give the responses or the information that you yourself wanted to, that's contained within your account?
Yes.
But is there any information that you put in and that it generates and spits out that then gets thrown into the pot?
Yeah.
Yes.
It all.
Yes.
It all does.
It's all.
Yeah. Unless you're...
That's the risk. That's the security issue, right? And that's why you've got to be careful. No name, just initials.
Yeah.
Right. And then when you use it,
so everything that you is correct.
Yeah.
And now, is there a way?
Yeah.
Stop that.
Okay.
I want it to me. There's a
Here's where you have to remember that you got to look where I'm coming from. So I will have like all the disclaimers. Not a lawyer. I don't work for ChatGPT. Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. Here's what I can tell you based on my experience. When you use the free version of ChatGPT, it has a smaller terms of service than the paid version. On the paid version, it says, and you can go into the settings and you can toggle, like basically don't use my prompts. Don't use anything that I put into this, and take that and go and put it into your training material.
Yeah.
So that's one note.
So you can do that.
Yeah.
But another note, go and read the New York Times because they have some excellent AI coverage in that media outlet. They did a really brilliant piece of investigative journalism that dropped in the Times on April 6th by a journalist named Cade Metz. And he did some really great, very thorough journalism that did a deep investigation into OpenAI, into Microsoft, into Google, and into Meta about exactly what are their practices when it comes to reusing people's information, when it comes to using copyrighted information. And this report showed that they are cutting corners all over the place. That they are, because there's such a race to try and grab that human-created content to feed into their system.
Yes.
Human-created content is gold. So they are bending the rules a bit. So there's ChatGPT or OpenAI, the company that makes it. They say that they aren't taking your prompts and feeding them in your model. Do I personally trust that? No, I do not. And same thing with
even if
Meta.
they are trying, their ability might be beyond their ability. So it's just use common sense.
Yeah.
If you've got information that's
trade secrets, confidential information, company information, personally identifiable information about your clients, and
even break things up into chunks.
Yeah.
For different outputs, so that you're not capturing everything
all in one. Yeah, in the context of one.
Take that page. Take that different searches. Just to break it up. Use your common sense.
Yeah.
If somebody found a page of a set of financial statements, they're not seeing the whole picture. They're just seeing that page. And so those are the types of practical things I'm doing as far as I can imagine or try to protect, right? And avoid names, email addresses and stuff like that.
Yeah. And that's part of that's general like AI literacy. That's general data literacy. I mean, this is where we start to kind of verge more out of professional and also into personal of, Meta AI, that company that has AI now running under the hood of Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp, and Messenger. You better believe that anything you put into Facebook is now inside their training material. All those pictures of your kids you've been feeding to it for years. Like, I personally think I'm done for. Like, I am too online. My image is everywhere. Like, I can't be personally out of a language model. But I have not posted a picture of my daughter on the internet for over 6 years now. And I won't until she's older and she understands. I'm that annoying parent that, signs the form where it says, do you agree to let your child be in photographs? I'm that annoying parent that says no, because I know where this stuff goes. I know that sounds a little like, woo.
No, I don't disagree. I think we've got to
put a picture into Instagram. They own it.
Yeah.
And they can do whatever they want with it, including feeding it into their AI models.
But
I could be wrong.
Back to Ivan's question earlier about sources of information on this.
Mm-hmm.
Any podcasts besides ours?
Oh,
or any sources of information that we can send people to?
Absolutely. Okay, so especially with kind of like a layperson, like general knowledge, not getting too technical, because there's a lot of really technical ones out there, and they use a lot of jargon and they're boring. So a podcast that I really, really like. So a podcast that I like that doesn't always talk about AI, but they do often talk about AI, comes from the New York Times. I like other media outlets. It just happens to be that the New York Times is doing some really good stuff on this subject lately. So there's one from the New York Times. It's called Hard Fork, and it's a general technology podcast. It's kind of funny and entertaining. The two hosts have really great charisma.
Much like ours.
Yeah, exactly.
Same dynamic.
And they talk a lot about whatever the tech issue of the day is, but more often than not these days, they've been talking a lot about AI. And then in terms of reading, there's someone that is a professor at the Wharton School. So he's a business professor. He's not a computer scientist, but he's done a heck of a lot of research into this, a lot of experiments. His name is Ethan Mollick. And Ethan Mollick just came out with a book about AI. It's currently the #1 New York Times bestseller. It's called Co-Intelligence, but it's written for the general public. Anybody could pick up Co-Intelligence. It's also not very long. It's a very digestible read talking about experiments with using generative AI. What is generative AI? Which way will this potentially go in the future? Right. How are companies... Because, it's all about devil's in the details, right?
How will this get somebody started, or is this just an overview? Is there anything...
Co-Intelligence is an overview, but the same guy, Ethan Mollick, he writes an email newsletter called One Useful Thing. And he sends out an email, I don't know, about once every 2 weeks of just kind of whatever is the latest, whatever he's thinking about. And if you go to oneusefulthing.com, you can dig back into the archives. So it's a good overview of what's going on, what's coming next. But in terms of how do you learn it, there isn't there isn't one definitive source because there are no best practices yet. We're making a lot of this stuff up as we go along. So there are a lot of people in different communities that are talking about it. I personally use LinkedIn a lot, and I'm talking about how I use AI on LinkedIn. I will literally, the other day, I wrote a post. I said, hey, this is how I'm using AI to record and summarize my video calls. I'm using this platform, and I don't like it. I tried this one, and it was okay. Is anybody using one that they really like? Yeah. And if you are, tell me what you like about it.
So maybe this is the point we ask people watching today. How are you using AI in your practice?
Yeah.
That would be kind of interesting.
Yeah, and have a conversation about it. I'm a big fan of thinking in public and thinking through this stuff, and nobody has the answers, but let's all just compare notes. Yeah. And there's no gatekeeping of this knowledge. This is going to be absolutely everywhere very quickly.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, I get it. I get exhausted, to be quite honest.
Yeah.
there's a lot of times where I need to fully log off from this stuff.
Oh, yeah.
I have two hobbies that are completely unrelated from computers. I really like to go hiking, and I really like gardening. I'm becoming quite an old lady. But like I need to connect with nature. I need to be away from my computer.
But you bring your phone on the hike?
For direction.
Yeah, but I'm not. I don't get it out. I'm not like watching TikTok while I'm hiking. I'm out there trying to just and also just think about this stuff, because it can be totally overwhelming.
Oh, yeah.
And if you're listening or watching and your gut instinct is, oh my gosh, I'm so behind. I don't know this. I don't understand. Like it's okay.
Yeah.
Because you're not late.
Yeah.
Nobody knows what's going on. And even the CEO of OpenAI is a gentleman named Sam Altman. I don't always agree with what Sam Altman says. He's come out with some kind of wacky statements lately. But there is one thing that he says regularly. Apparently people that have been to his office say that this is written above his desk, and he often posts it on Twitter. I refuse to call it X. I will not call it X. In my world, it's called Twitter. He regularly says, no one knows what happens next. And I think that can be a bit overwhelming and a bit scary, but it can also be really liberating and freeing to just think like, we're all just figuring this stuff out together. And anything that you learn now, you're probably going to have to unlearn and learn something new, and then unlearn and then learn something new. So, I mean, this like bringing it back to...
We've done that the whole way.
Exactly. And bringing this back to AJAG and what, people do, like this is the point of professional development, because you never stop learning. You don't go to business school or you get your CA and then you're like, okay, that's done. I'm going to turn my brain off for 50 years. Like this is why there is professional development in your industry. So, just keep learning.
Right. I think that's a great way to wrap this up. There's been fascinating discussion.
It's been fun.
Yeah.
And we're going to be talking more about AI in upcoming course offerings, starting with a course that will be presented by David Chernitsky about AI and cybersecurity. That'll be available on ajag.ca later in June. So thank you again, everyone, for watching. Thank you, Avery, for being here. And
You too.
yeah.
My pleasure.
Yeah.
Thank you both.
And we'll see you next time.
Bye, everyone. You introducing?
Let me read it. Oh, yeah. What episode number is this?
And then 7. It's episode 7.
All right, you ready?